Okay, Joe Messina invoked the name of John Kennedy. Don't you want John Kennedy's tax cuts? JFK laid out his whole idea for his tax cuts in the debate with Richard Nixon in 1960 on national television. You know, those of us who were alive in 1960 I watched this in real time. And JFK, he ends this, Nixon goes into this screed about how, Kennedy wants to raise your taxes. And Kennedy says, yeah, we actually want to increase tax revenue. In other words, we want to bring in more money. And how are we going to do that? He doesn't say we're going to do that by trickle down. He says we're going to do that by closing loopholes. Now, this GOP tax scam just added a whole bunch of new loopholes. In fact, I'm going to be looking at it. I'm going to be talking to my CPA sometime before the end of the year going, hey, this pass-through thing, I've got a corporation here that's, theoretically a pass-through company. My understanding is that, from what I've read, it's only going to apply to real estate companies and stock speculators, to the big boys. Only Donald Trump and Paul Ryan and Bob Corker can take advantage of that. Bob Corker with his $7 million a year in pass-through income. He's going to save $1 million on his taxes at least. But, apparently I can't. I don't, but I don't know. We'll find out. But, the bottom line is that Kennedy, when Kennedy was speaking about this, he was saying we're going to close these loopholes. Not we're going to add more loopholes, which is what the Republicans just did. He said we're going to close the loopholes, and with the extra money from that, we're going to increase our spending on education. We're going to increase our spending on health. We're going to increase our spending on housing. Now, you don't do that with a tax cut, right? You do that with a tax increase. Here is John Kennedy. And at the very end, you're going to hear this plaintive cry where from the voice of the long-dead President Kennedy from 1960 saying, well, I will play actually the very end of this first and then play the whole thing for you with the end again so you can hear. But this is how Kennedy ends it.
But the fact of the matter is, here is where I stand. And I just want to have it on the public record.
Right. Actually, let me back that up a little bit. He says,
which is, Mr. Nixon misstates my figures constantly, which is, of course, is right. But the fact of the matter is, here is where I stand. And I just want to have it on the public record.
Okay, so Mr. Nixon is lying about what Mr. Kennedy is proposing. What is it then that Mr. Kennedy is proposing? Here it is.
I think it's possible to gain a $700 million to $1 billion through tax changes, which I believe would close up loopholes on dividend withholding, on expense accounts.
Yeah, we're going to close the loopholes.
So in my judgment, we would spend more money in this administration on aid to education. We'd spend more money on housing. We'd spend more money, and I hope more wisely, on defense than this administration has done. Mr. Nixon misstates my figures constantly, which is, of course, is right. But the fact of the matter is, here is where I stand, and I just want to have it on the public record.
But to this day, Republicans are still misquoting or just plain old flat out lying about John Kennedy. Barbara in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Barbara, what's on your mind today?
I was just listening to, excuse me, Tom. How are you doing today? I didn't mean to just...
I'm fine, Barbara. That's okay. It's great to just start right out. Go for it.
I just listened to this guy, Joe Messina. He deep down in his heart believes that somebody's actually going to walk into his house and give him $4,000.
Apparently.
That's what behooves me. How can you believe this? Okay, you're going to get $4,000. Paul Ryan's going to get $3 or $4 million. Whichever day's going to get, Corker's going to get what he's going to get. Donald Trump's going to walk away with we don't know how much because we have never seen his income tax.
Yep.
But you're sitting here feeling good about $4,000 and they're getting ready to make millions?
Billions. Actually, I mean, this is the total cost of this tax bill is $5 trillion. I don't know why the media doesn't keep saying that. Over a 10-year period, it is going to cost $5 trillion. $1.5 trillion of that is coming from the added debt, which puts it on the federal deficit, which will actually end up being much more than $1.5 trillion because you have to pay interest on the federal debt. And the other $3.5 trillion is coming out of the pockets of people who make less than $1 million a year, and it's going into the pockets of people who make more than $1 million a year, broadly speaking.
This is what I am literally honest to behold. But I think what people fail to understand, and nobody ever actually listened to what Mitt Romney said when he ran, and nobody keeps listening to Paul Ryan. They keep on talking about this 47% that don't pay taxes. Who are these people?
Well,
My son works 2 jobs, so he pays off both his paychecks.
right.
He's paying double taxes.
Well, first of all,
Because he's got to file his income tax at the end of the year. He might have to pay, he might not. But he's not going to get back no $4,000.
yeah, Mitt Romney was sort of lying and sort of not, and here's how it works. When you file your taxes, you can take a deduction for yourself, for your spouse, for your kids.
He's single.
Yeah, well, you can file a deduction for yourself. That deduction was around $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 per person, something like that. So for a family of 4, it added up to like $20,000. What they've done is they've raised that personal exemption for yourself and your spouse from $5,000 to roughly $10,000. So up to $20,000 a year in a household is exempt from income taxes. Now, while household income has gone up to in the neighborhood of between $40,000 and $50,000 annually, depending on whose numbers you're looking at. Individual income, you know, the average or the median individual income in the United States is still around $25,000 a year. So if you've got a $20,000 tax exemption, you only have $5,000 worth of taxable income. That doesn't qualify you to even pay income taxes. And so that's the truth that Mitt Romney was saying. What he was actually saying is that 47% of Americans make so little money that they don't qualify to pay income taxes. But where he was lying was that 100% of those 47% of Americans, all of them who are working and not paying income taxes, are paying FICA taxes. They are paying sales taxes. They are paying property taxes. They are paying, you know, register your vehicle taxes. They're paying all kinds of taxes. And in fact, people who make less than $40,000 a year pay a larger percentage of their income in taxes than people who make over $1 million a year.
So I just want to end it by saying this, Tom. I did not know that some parts of this country was so dadgum gullible. It really hurts my heart. When you play stupid, that hurts all of us.
Yeah, I agree.
Not just one person, it hurts everybody.
And
I'll be so glad when they figure it out.
Well, and the real tragedy, Barbara, is, I mean, this is principally benefiting billionaires. You've got a television network owned by a billionaire named Rupert Murdoch that has been relentlessly and mercilessly flogging this thing, you know, putting a pretty face on it and talking about how wonderful it is and Trump is wonderful and all this. And that's why, you know, I mean, you look at these surveys and there's this stubborn 25, 28% of Americans who think everything Trump is doing is great and the GOTP tax scam is actually going to be good for all of us. Those are the people who watch Fox News. I'm
sorry. I have to laugh, and I know other people are calling, but it just, I wake up every morning, and I hear this man's mouth, and I hear people talk about this, and I am sick and tired of it. The citizenry of this country, wake up, get up off your behinds between now and November, and vote.
Yes, and make sure that you're registered to vote.
Vote for your children. Vote for your citizenry of this country. This is your government. It's not theirs. It's yours, and stop letting them walk on you. Thank you so much, Tom.
You're welcome, Barbara. You should have your own talk show. That was brilliant. Barbara, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. Mary in Sunrise Beach, Missouri. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind?
Well, I just heard this morning about the bird rule. I don't know. I was going to ask you if you would extrapolate on that because according to the bird rule, the way this tax plan has gone through is illegal. Could you extrapolate on that for a moment?
Perhaps, yeah.
Thank you.
What Robert Byrd came up with this rule back in the 80s or 90s or whenever it was that basically says that Congress can pass once a year. Congress can pass a piece of legislation. The Senate can pass a piece. This is exclusively to the Senate. Once a year, the Senate can pass a piece of legislation through what's called reconciliation, where instead of being able to filibuster it, the bill is filibuster-proof, which means that you're operating under the constitutional rules of the Senate rather than the rules that the Senate has created for itself, which includes the filibuster. The filibuster is not in the Constitution. The Constitution simply says a piece of legislation passes if a majority of senators vote for it. So what the Byrd rule did is it allowed that type of thing to pass, but only under certain circumstances. It cannot add to the deficit more than 10 years out. That's the principal thing. And the problem in this legislation that the Republicans had, and these are relatively small things, One was the 529s. There are these educational savings accounts that you can set aside money for your kids. They wanted to expand that. So, you know, this is like Betsy DeVos's thing, right? They wanted to expand that so that wealthy people could put aside money tax deferred into a 529 account and literally not saving, you know, 15 years for your kids to go to college, but literally use that money in the same year tax-free to send their kids to a Catholic school, or, you know, a religious school, or a right-wing school, or a creationist school, or whatever you want. And the problem is that that provision would stay in law beyond 10 years. And so it would have a negative impact on the deficit more than 10 years out. So that's why they had to strip it out. And that's why they're doing away with all of the personal tax breaks. You know, it was like Joe was saying, hey, you know, I'm going to get $4,000. Well, yeah, now, well, it's not going to be 4,000. It's going to be more like 1,000, maybe, if you're one of the half of the middle class who is actually going to get a tax cut. But that tax cut is going to go away in 5, 6, 7, 8 years in order to comply with the Byrd Rule, so that there is no impact on the deficit. But the tax cuts for billionaires, the end of the estate tax, the tax cuts for big multinational corporations, those are there for